But I'll be honest, there was many technicians that came to me and said, look, we like you. We know that you're interviewing for the position, but we really, really like her. And we really want you to think about implementing and keeping some of the things that she was talking about and attempting to implement.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with the frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal to help you fight dirty. Every instrument, every time. Whether you are tuning in for education or inspiration, we're wicked glad you did. Now, turn on those washes and turn up the volume. It's time to go Beyond Clean.
This week on Beyond Clean, we speak with Michael Compton, sterile processing leader, who's currently on the go, Hank. And we reached out, we gave him 2 days notice, yanked him onto the show. Love it. And he's always been such a huge supporter of the show. I see him commenting and engaging on LinkedIn. And I'm looking forward to some in-person events coming up and meeting so many of these people that we've had a great pleasure of talking to over the last 2 years, Hank, because I don't think I've seen any of them live in quite some time or haven't even had a chance to meet them. And my network has grown so much. And Michael is one of those that I'm really looking forward to seeing in person at some point, hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, Justin, one of the great things about podcasting is it gives you a good excuse to talk to people. So we get to do this every week, and we get to talk to different folks about different things. And it's so great. Like, I've known Michael for a while, and there's a lot of topics that we could cover with him, but knowing all the work he's done in interim leadership and all the transitions that he's been through, both in and out of departments, I am absolutely sure he's going to have a lot of great insight to share and hopefully encouragement to share for some of those leaders out there who are afraid of change and afraid of transitions. Maybe they don't want to take that new job, even though it's a great opportunity, because they don't want to change or go through that process. Or maybe they're afraid that they're about to leave a department and all these many years of hard work could potentially go to waste, right? So I hope that you can tune in for the entirety of this episode and really see from the beginning to end what that transition process can and should be like as a sterile processing leader.
All right. Well, stay tuned. This is going to be a good one, a heartfelt interview in just a few moments with Michael Compton. We'll be right back after a break. I'm Justin Poulin.
And I'm Hank Balch.
From the 17 studios, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
All right, we're here with Michael Compton, sterile processing leader, and we're going to be talking about managing leadership transitions that your sterile processing team has to go through. And so, Michael, it's been a while since we spoke on the phone, but finally you're here on a Beyond Clean podcast. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. As we said earlier in our conversation, I've been listening since season 2, and I've caught almost every episode, and it's just a pleasure to be here, guys. I love what you guys are doing for the industry. You guys are my number one recommended source to most of my colleagues, so I appreciate you guys.
Wow, Michael. Well, very flattering. And I know that's the second time you've given me that compliment in just a few minutes, but I got to tell you, that means a lot. And we really appreciate the feedback and you telling everybody about Beyond Clean and the work and the conferences. So thank you very much for that.
Absolutely.
I want to start, maybe you could just talk a little bit about how you found your passion for the industry and what got you excited about sterile processing before we kind of talk about the impact of, leadership changes in the departments.
Absolutely. Great question. To be honest with you, I never saw myself as a sterile processing leader, career wise. I saw myself as a surgical technologist That's what I originally signed up to be in the Army. 2007 to 2010, I was a surgical tech for Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio. And that's where I got my formidable skills. I spent about a year and a half in sterile processing and a year and a half in the operating room. Honestly, the moment I saw a baby being born via C-section, and there I am with the retractors, an 18-year-old kid not really believing what's happening right before my very eyes. I thought that's what I was going to do the rest of my life. But long story short, I believe God and the universe had a different plan for me. And now I'm here, 16 years later as a sterile processing leader. So it's been a privilege to be a part of both the surgical technology side and the sterile processing side. And really what's invited me in to the industry and really changed my mind from being a surgical technologist to become more so focused on developing my sterile processing career was somebody noticed something in me. They noticed a leadership trait, and I was really, humbled. And the next thing you know, my entire perspective is changing. So yeah, that's kind of how it all began.
Boy, I know we're talking about leadership changes, but you just described a moment of mentorship where somebody took an interest in you and then, led you down what has now been a 16-year path for you so far and continuing. And we highlight these things all the time, but do you think you would have found sterile processing if somebody didn't introduce you and bring you into the fold?
No, not at all, Justin. I like I said, I joined the Army to be a surgical technologist. And, half of the training was in sterile processing. And so to be honest with you, it was a lot, even as, I was getting the education, the formidable training in sterile processing, my mindset was, not really there. And to be really transparent with you, I didn't really understand that. I didn't believe that I was going to be in the industry until a couple years into my career. After my 3-year commitment in the Army at Barnes-Jewish Hospital, Derek Jones, the supervisor there at the North Campus, he said, "I see something in you. I know you're a surgical tech, but we need leaders, and it would be great if you could help me out." And the next thing you know, there I am, and I haven't really looked back ever since.
And so, Michael, that was your first transition into leadership, but you've had a couple of other transitions along your career, and obviously that's the theme of this episode, because any leader goes through a transition. Like, we're not born as sterile processing managers or directors. We all come from somewhere. So managing that transition process, both as a leader and also as the staff responding to new leaders, but also it's not just a one-way transition, because there's also that transition out. So we'll probably talk about that at some point in this interview as well. But can you give kind of a high-level overview of the things that happen during a typical transition of sterile processing leadership? So, like, what happens with the people in the department, the processes, policies, those kinds of things?
So as you alluded to, Hank, this isn't my first rodeo. I've been traveling around the country for the last 5 years. I've transitioned several times now into various leadership roles, and I found the following to be typical. With people in particular, I meet with all the key surgical service stakeholders, and I introduce myself, and then we discuss common goals and methods to achieve those goals. I find this alone does something really special regarding how people view you as a leader. They see that you're taking the initiative not only to meet them, but to truly pick their brain and see how you can help them achieve their own goals as well. Regarding the processes that are typical, I initiate a comprehensive assessment of the department during my first 30 days, and then I decide with the team which processes need improving and are implemented, and then I prioritize those processes with the team, and then we monitor those processes and our progress. Regarding policies, it's the same thing. I like to do all this within the first 30 days. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but definitely within the first 90 days.
And it's really all about setting expectations, right? Like, if you want to be successful, you want to make sure that everybody knows what you're going to be doing, where you think the initial opportunities lie before you get really deep into the people and the processes and the policies. You might identify some quick gaps, but I think that's so critical to just rally that. Do you ever run into a situation where they won't meet with you right away? that kind of put you off?
Well, yeah, absolutely. One of the most difficult things when I was a director in Brooklyn was just getting everyone together to meet. And so usually it was the first email was, and sometimes it was, a face-to-face conversation. And the first message from myself that I conveyed was, I'm a new leader here. I want to be a key partner with you. How can I help you achieve your goals? And here are mine. What do you think about these? And to me, a lot of times, to be honest, I've had a lot of success because I think when people see that you care not only about your goals being achieved, but theirs as well, I've got a lot of success. Now to those who haven't responded or that don't respond, what I normally do is I try to talk to one of their colleagues until that usually after, 2 or 3 emails, 2 or 3 conversations, they see my passion, they see my heart. They usually, accept. Very rarely do I not at least get a conversation at some point with them. Now, to be honest with you, I don't know if I ever got every single key stakeholder in the room at that hospital, but I did my very best, Justin.
Yeah, Michael, I'm not a guy who likes to talk about my feelings a lot, but I want to position this. That's
how we're the yin and the yang on this show that way.
But I want to transition this next question, because you're talking about the process of coming in and having those meetings, and sometimes the meetings being successful and sometimes not being as engaged as you would like. But what does that process feel like? You talked about the people and the policies and all those kinds of things, but I know that you've just experienced that from your perspective, but can you share for folks out there who maybe have not gone through that leadership transition themselves, or maybe have just had one experience so they don't have anything else to compare it to? Like, what do those transitions feel like from the inside?
Wow, I feel like that's a loaded question, Hank. There's so much there. It just depends, I believe, on the context that the leader is placed in. And I do believe it has a lot to do with the leader's previous work and regarding how they created the culture and the atmosphere in that department and the intermingling departments like the operating room and PACU and the ICU. And if I feel that I'm being treated as a human being and the expectations were clear, and I walked into an organization that makes sense regarding those previous agreements and expectations that we set together, I feel great. However, a lot of the times that doesn't happen. And to be honest with you, about half of the time I've transitioned, possibly more, I felt like I was sort of being thrown into the water, and I was, and to be honest with you, I don't swim well, but I do the best I can. A doggy paddle, Justin, to this day.
I really like that analogy, though. I mean, sometimes you're there. You've got to do it. And, you're kind of playing off that sink or swim, metaphor that people use so often. And I think it's so true, but you kind of put it in a different light. But the thing is you're there to do a job, and the only thing you can control is what you do. And to Hank's point about how that feels, hey, it feels great when everything kicks off well, but you're kind of describing, that dis-ease or that discomfort when it's kind of not going the way you ideally want it. And there is something to be said about first impressions. So yeah, I mean, you're in this state of discomfort. At some point you're going to break through. They're going to see your heart. They're going to see your competence, and you're going to win them over and have, meaningful, impactful change. But how do you get through that until you're on the other side of it with that whole discomfort piece?
Right. So I think it's about being persistent. And also, I do believe it's about continuing to share your heart consistently.
Yeah, I feel like you really just have to keep pushing through that discomfort, and eventually you're going to get to the other side, at least hopefully, and probably 9 times out of 10, if your heart's in the right place and you have the level of competence, people are eventually going to fall in. But it's not just discomfort for you, right? It's discomforting for the staff too, in some cases, because here they are kind of I don't know who this person is. I liked the way things used to be, or great. It's fresh. Not everybody's always feeling the same way about the transition from one leader to a new leader. So, what are some ways that staff respond to those leadership transitions outside of what I just kind of mentioned there? Maybe more in their behavior than anything else.
Right. And again, it depends on the department. I can tell you one of the last departments that I actually did a travel assignment with, and I applied there to be a leader for their department. And you could tell that the team was shy and they were quiet. And so I had those initial conversations of, hey, my name is Michael Compton. I'm a traveler here, but I'm also wondering, if I could be a part of the leadership team here and make a difference and make an impact. And what would that look like to you? And sometimes I would get a bite and sometimes I wouldn't. And when I wouldn't, I would try to change it up on a more personal, but also easy type of topic, more so, how is your day going? How is your family? And then when they see my work ethic and they see that I want to help make the department as good as it can be, usually after time, some people are quicker than others, but usually I get the buy-in to at least have those conversations of what would they like to see, in their most ideal department. And that's usually how I phrase it. How can we together, whether we are best friends or we don't have anything in common, how do we make a department in which, we feel comfortable going to and we're providing the best care that we can for our patients?
So it sounds to me like you're trying to establish an environment of respect. Do you feel like you come into some environments where maybe the respect has been missing in the past?
Yeah, to be honest with you, about half the time or more, the leadership is either not present at all. There are no leaders. There's no lead tech, supervisors, managers, and above. Or they have had managers, supervisors, etc. However, there's not been consistency. There's been high turnover. There's not a lot of trust. I believe it's understandable. And being a tech for so long and going through the same things and being in those exact environments, I can sympathize with them. And to be honest with you, I think that's probably the key of keys that I've learned in my leadership journey is that when you really genuinely are a tech first, a human being first, and you are truly not in it for any other reason, but doing the best job you can for the sake of the entire department, people believe in you. Maybe they don't want to believe in you. Maybe it takes a lot of time, but even if they don't ever say it, you know it by the way they respond, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're talking about earning the respect. And that's so critical. But I want to flip this thing on its head because I've positioned all of these questions as if you're coming in during a leadership change where the prior leader maybe wasn't a good leader or it was absent and they're actually, putting a leader in place versus just having supervisors reporting to another department. I know that all kind of happens. I want to talk to you about what it's like when you come in on the heels of a rock star leader who already developed a great culture because, then what are they sort of anticipating, right? What if the department knows that the person that's been leading them for the last, 5-6 years was the best person to ever do the job. And now all of a sudden we got to deal with, so-and-so. How can they ever fill that person's shoes? I really want to hear the counter to the way we've been taking this conversation.
Yes. And that's interesting that you say that because when I was in Florida, it was kind of a similar type of thing. I know not to contradict what I said earlier, but they did have an interim manager. I mean, we had a great relationship established. And nobody wanted to see her go, but being from Boston, she wanted to go back home, and she was there just temporarily to help out. But I'll be honest, there was many technicians that came to me and said, look, we like you. We know that you're interviewing for the position, but we really, really like her. And we really want you to think about doing some of the implementing and keeping some of the things that she was talking about and attempting to implement. And so, yeah, to be honest with you, the first thing I did was gulp, the first time that the first technician said that. And then the second time I heard it, I go, you know what? I don't think this should be a competition between her and I, because at the time I didn't know if she was going to stay or not. I knew that I wanted the opportunity. And so I went to her and told her, hey, look, I just want you to know I applied for the position, but you've done a great job, obviously, in the short time that you've been here. And, I'd love to talk to you about why, I'd like the gig. And then the next thing I know, she goes, Michael, I've been watching you. I'm glad that you came to my office. I'm glad we had this conversation. I'm only going to be here temporarily, and I would love to endorse you. And so it's interesting just having that conversation at that time, and though things didn't work out, I did learn a lot about a lot from her about how to keep that motivation and inspiration going by looking at things from her perspective, as obviously the team was starting to buy in, a team in which has, really been neglected for quite some time regarding proper leadership.
So, Michael, you've been sharing a lot of insight in general for these leadership transitions, but I really want to target a particular instance of transition for the listeners, and that's that first leadership opportunity. Like you alluded to it earlier, like how you got your first opportunity. And every leader has that first time where they step into the manager office and they maybe look around and think, am I supposed to be here? Or do they know like who they put here? What advice can you give for folks that are in that position or looking forward to that position for that first transition, the first time out of the box? Like, what should they be aware of? What should they be thinking about? Who should they talk to in the facility? Like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is to find a mentor. And though we don't see each other face to face as often as I'd like, Hank, I've always considered you that ever since you started posting on social media. But it would be very, very beneficial to find a mentor within the hospital or possibly at a local chapter. And to be honest with you, the reason I think more so than any other is because we know we are the subject matter experts, but I do think that in this complicated, chaotic surgical service environment that we find ourselves in as sterile processing professionals, we can forget how important we are and how valuable we are, and the fact that we are the leaders of our department, regardless of the title. And so I would say to really focus on your own self, your own skills, growing those skills, and really just not listening to all the outside noise and chatter regarding the politics, regarding anything that anyone says. I think if you focus on doing the best job that you can, fostering healthy relationships, really committing to following through with your word, I believe that every leader can make it in this industry as a leader doing those things.
I mean, even that mentor piece that you talked about, it's a good reminder for new leaders, young leaders, that, your surgical service director, for instance, has been there for 25 years and you feel like they've just always been the director. Like they also had their first leadership opportunity and they probably still remember what that felt like. And so whoever that mentor is, they have that personal experience to share in ways where you don't have to relive those mistakes. You don't have to make those statements maybe that you shouldn't have made. Or in my instance, I think I've told this story before, like you don't have to send that email that you shouldn't have sent or shouldn't have CC'd somebody, right? Like those are things that you learn and can learn through great mentorship relationships. And I appreciate you giving me a shout out. Obviously very honored for that. But I want to highlight the fact that you and I, like we've met, but that connection has really happened mostly online, like through phone calls, through emails, like through LinkedIn messages. And there's still so much value in that. So for folks out there listening, like don't feel like your mentor has to be someone that you see every day or has to be someone that works in your hospital. Like they could literally be someone across the globe, as long as they care about you succeeding and are willing to invest that time, however much it is. That's what really matters. So that's a fantastic piece of insight there.
Thank you, Hank, and well said as well. I totally agree.
Now, you mentioned something in your answer too about chapters and like getting plugged into your local chapters. And maybe that's a good place to take this next on just the importance of networking in general. So I want to talk about at that chapter level and then maybe also at the facility level, right? Like how important is it, or is it important to get to know the other managers out there that are maybe your customers, or maybe it's like the manager of food service, for instance? Like, why do those kind of relationships matter as a leader in transition?
Hank, to be honest with you, this is something that I've been thinking about for quite some time, ever since I started to believe that I was a leader. Because I have been called that in the past. I've, been, a labelless leader to some degree, but I'm still learning what that means. And who helps me define what that means is the organization, not only the leaders, but everyone in that hospital. And I can't put my finger on it, but I can tell you that there's power in agreement. There is something about aligning with people that, regardless if they share your same views, that are wanting to do what's right. And that could be a challenge sometimes. It might be a challenging conversation that you have to have. I've had many of them. And sometimes I even seek out counsel before I have conversations, because I want to say the right things, like you were alluding to earlier, because I do mean well and I know my intentions are right. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I've received the buy-in, from the key stakeholders I'm trying to communicate with. And the more, the better. That's what I've been finding. The more people that you can align with and agree, the better. So I start with surgical services, and then I just branch out into the entire hospital.
Yeah, that's so critical, because you're helping contribute to organizational alignment in doing that. And you're really a conduit, for healthy culture. And I think that's critical. And we've really had this conversation go from start to finish. It's almost like I'm a new leader or I'm a brand new leader, to how do you really nurture that environment? And now I'm going to take it the other way, because I asked you earlier, how do you follow a leader, whether it was a poor leader or a good leader? Now it's, how do you leave the organization in a better position than when you arrived, and make sure that it stays that way after you're gone? And I think this is a real critical piece. One of the things you described was trying to move into a leadership position where there was someone that was going to be exiting, and you talked about alignment, and you kind of combined those two. Those were two themes that I heard in both conversations. You tried to line yourself with the outgoing, learn as much as you could, before they left. But I think the key thing you said was that you didn't see it as a competition. I don't have to see this as a competition, but you don't have a lot of control over that when somebody, especially if they're a little insecure in their ability and they're coming in, or maybe they were serving under your leadership, whatever the case may be, but they may see it as a competition as you're on your way out. And I think a common mistake is blowing everything up and trying to start over when it's already in a pretty good place. And so how do you make sure that when you transition out, it doesn't all fall apart?
Right. That's the first concern I usually have when I do inherit departments that are rather smooth and, healthy and competent, obviously aligned with our regulatory agencies. And when that happens, to be honest, first of all, it's a fresh of breath air. And I'm so thankful for those leaders that really paved the way for myself. I give them the credit. I let the team know that whatever they were doing that you like, that's working, that is legal, that's aligned with our regulatory agencies, let's keep doing that. I take it slow. I have a lot of one-on-one conversations. I want everyone to feel valued. I want to spend adequate time and really engage everyone as an individual, but also as a team member at the same time. And that's the key, I believe.
So, Michael, we've kind of walked it right from start to finish, right? It's my first day in the department and I'm trying to make a good first impression, or even so much as to say, I've never been a leader before. It's brand new for me. And here I go, all the way through, how do you then establish that foundation, work within the organization and get that alignment? But now I want to take it to the finish line, I guess. And when you are knowing that it's time, that your time is done, you're transitioning, maybe you got a new opportunity, but how do we make sure that, as a leader, all the good work that we did, all the relationships that we built, all of the policies and processes, How do we help ensure that when we're gone, there's not a big drop off and everything goes back to the way it was before, and all of a sudden the department isn't in better hands than, when we arrived? How do we make sure that they just continue that success and build on it?
So Justin, it depends on the situation. If I'm handing off the department to another leader, we get together, we talk about what has been working. We talk about what policies that I've initiated, but maybe I haven't finished. And we have as many conversations that we need to have until they feel fully confident that they have received the handoff that makes them feel that respected and that helps them succeed. And so if there isn't someone there, which is quite sad, what I like to do is, as I write up my summary, what I've done to make the department successful, what I think they could continue to do as a department to render the success that we have received, but to also add and build on that success. I say my goodbyes, and once in a while I shed a tear, and usually I stay in touch with every department that I've actually been to. So I'm very thankful.
I like that you continue to make yourself available, because we've often talked about mentorship being in short supply. And so I think it's really critical if you have moved around a lot, and as you said, traveled the country, to continue to influence those folks that you've met is really important. I also think that what I heard you say was, when you're able to hand it off, it's a little bit easier because you feel like they have the history behind it and they know exactly where they are in the continuum of change and improvement and what the next steps are. But in the absence of all that, you have a summary and you try to leave them with the blueprint so that they can continue to guide themselves. And I think this really goes back to what Hank said, and I think you echoed it during the conversation as well. But you don't have to be in that leadership position to be a leader. You are the subject matter expert. So here's the blueprint. You're hoping to instill confidence in them to continue following that path. Am I right?
That's right. 100%.
Yeah, Justin, something actually that I wrote just a couple of weeks ago on this topic is, it's easy to forget that most technicians these days outstay and outlast their managers. And to Mike's point, that institutional knowledge is so valuable. Like, you have not only seen the blueprint, you've been a part of building it. Like, you are the building, right? Living stones, if you will. And to take advantage of that, in a good way, not to throw your weight around like, I was here before you got here, manager, and I'll be here when you go, but to really try to be an advocate for the positive impact that knowledge can have, to welcome the leader, to let them know what has worked, and to also let them know what the systemic challenges are, because you have seen them from year to year to year. So all of that is so important. And I just wanted to echo that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I totally agree. And as you were speaking, Hank, I just saw so many different images. It rings so true.
So, Michael, I think you did a really phenomenal job in this interview, and we didn't give you a lot of time to prepare either. And so sometimes I think that's the best. And in this case, it definitely was, because I really got a chance to see how big your heart is. And I think if you had over prepared for this interview, we wouldn't have gotten to see that. And so I'm really happy we got to see that side of you today. And I think you added a lot to not only to the interview, but to the podcast in general. So I appreciate that. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you having me.
That was Michael Compton, sterile processing leader, actually in transition, moving as we speak on to his next opportunity, and pinch hit at the last minute, not necessarily at the most opportune time, Hank. But I can't think of a better time to talk to somebody about leadership transitions than when they're in a life transition themselves, literally moving from one state to another. He did a really great job, gave us really, I think, a lot of the human side of leadership. We've done so many interviews around, I don't want to call it the technical, but a lot of the technical aspects of leadership. And I think we had plenty of that here in this interview today, but just about the conversation around alignment and not just aligning with the staff when you show up, but really trying to get all through the hospital with all those internal stakeholders. And I like the way he approaches his conversations. He's not coming in with, this is my plan, this is the way we do it, and you must do it. He's really trying to learn where they feel like they've had some success. He's understanding the value system that he's trying to integrate himself into. And I think that's, really important for smooth transitions in and out of departments.
Yeah, Justin, we may have talked about this before, but the phrase politics, or the word politics, kind of has a dirty connotation these days, and for good reason. But in this context, politics is what you have to be good at as a leader, especially as a leader transitioning in. You have to build these relationships quickly with the staff, with the other leaders in the department, outside of the department, around the hospital. All of that has a political aspect to it. Just because you have a great resume and they hired you for a reason doesn't mean that everyone is going to automatically respect you for it. So you got to do the hard work. And yeah, this question about transitions is such an important one. It's one thing to be in a department for many years and get to work at that leadership and work at those relationships. But we're talking about, what do you do that first week on the job? Or what do you do that last week on the job to make sure that all the years you put in actually stick? I honestly think Michael did a terrific job peeling back and letting the rest of us really see what that looks like. And I hope folks today will come away with just one nugget of information to change maybe a process that they've been doing in their transition, or maybe change a way that they treat their leaders who are in transition.
We really didn't take that part of the perspective, but you said something at the end. I've been here long before you came, and I want to be here long after you're gone. And we've always done it this way, and that's the way it's going to be. And I don't think that people always realize they're doing that. I think that that's sometimes in the department really subliminal. So from the other side of the coin, if you're going through or about to go through any kind of a leadership change in your department, hopefully you'll help kind of keep this in mind as well, and at least be open to good leadership during these transitions. So that's going to do it for this week's show. As a reminder, you can help support Beyond Clean by subscribing on Apple, Amazon, or Google Podcasts, as well as Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or on your favorite podcast application. We also have bonus content for you for certain episodes. All you got to do is download our smartphone application for iPhone and Android. We'd also really appreciate a rating and a review, because your feedback is important to the show. And certainly, if you have any topics that you'd like us to cover, or just some general feedback for the show, send an email. It's info@beyondclean.net. And on behalf of Hank and myself, really appreciate you listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean.